The aroma of roasted turkey filled Margaret Chen's modest apartment in Queens, New York, mixing with the familiar scent of her mother's secret spice blend that she'd carried from Taiwan 40 years ago. At 62, Margaret moved with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd spent decades perfecting the art of hosting family gatherings, even in a space that seemed to shrink with each passing year. "Mom, you really didn't have to go through all this trouble," Sarah said, watching her mother arrange the cranberry sauce just so on the worn dining table. Sarah's voice carried that particular tone Margaret had learned to recognize, the one that preceded conversations about practical matters and being realistic about the future. "It's Thanksgiving, sweetheart." "This is what families do," Margaret replied, her hand steady as she placed the carved turkey at the center of the table. She'd been up since dawn, preparing everything from scratch, just as she had every year since Sarah was born 35 years ago. The doorbell rang, and Margaret's heart lifted slightly. That must be David with the kids. But when Sarah opened the door, only her husband Ryan stood there, his tall frame filling the doorway, smartphone in hand as always. Behind him, the November wind whipped through the hallway, carrying the chill of approaching winter. "Where are Emma and Josh?" Margaret asked, trying to hide her disappointment. "They're with my parents today," Ryan said, not looking up from his phone as he entered. "We'll do alternating holidays. It's more efficient." Margaret felt the word efficient land like a small stone in her chest. Everything in Ryan's world was about efficiency. He worked as a senior manager at a tech startup in Manhattan, the kind of place where they had beer on tap and meditation rooms, but somehow never enough time for family dinners. As they settled around the table, Margaret noticed how Ryan's eyes kept scanning her apartment, the faded wallpaper she couldn't afford to replace, the mismatched chairs she'd collected over the years, the old radiator that clanked like a ghost in the walls. She saw her home through his eyes and felt suddenly self-conscious. "So, Margaret," Ryan began, finally pocketing his phone, "Sarah and I have been talking." Margaret's hand paused halfway to the gravy boat. In her experience, nothing good ever followed those words. "About what?" she asked, though part of her already knew. Sarah reached across the table, her manicured hand covering Margaret's weathered one. "Mom, we're worried about you living alone. This neighborhood isn't what it used to be, and this building, well, the landlord hasn't exactly been keeping up with maintenance." "I've been here 25 years. Margaret said quietly. "This is my home." "But it doesn't have to be," Ryan interjected, his tone suggesting he was presenting a PowerPoint slide. "There are some excellent senior living communities in New Jersey. Modern facilities, medical staff on site, organized activities, they even have Tai Chi classes." Margaret almost smiled at that, as if she needed someone to organize Tai Chi for her when she'd been practicing in Flushing Meadows Park every morning for the past 15 years. "I'm not ready for a nursing home," she said firmly. "It's not a nursing home," Ryan corrected, his voice taking on an edge of impatience. "It's an active senior community. Very different thing." "Ryan," Sarah warned softly. But he was already warming to his topic, the way he did in his business meetings. "Look, Margaret, I understand this is emotional, but we need to be practical. Sarah's worried sick about you every day. She calls you 3 times just to make sure you're okay. It's affecting her work, her stress levels, and frankly, this whole situation is becoming a burden." The word hung in the air like smoke from an extinguished candle. "Ryan!" Sarah gasped. "What?" "I'm just being honest. Isn't that what families do? We've got our own kids to think about, college funds to build, our own retirement to plan for, and every month we're sending money to help with rent and groceries and medical bills. At some point, we have to think about what's sustainable." Margaret's hands found the edge of the table, gripping it for support. In all her years of widowhood, through all the challenges of raising Sarah alone after James died, she had never felt like a burden. She had worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3, to put Sarah through college. She had been the one Sarah called when Emma was colicky, the one who knew how to get Josh to eat his vegetables. She had given everything, and now— "I see," Margaret said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. "I understand." "Mom, that's not what he meant," Sarah began. "No, it's all right." Margaret stood, began clearing plates that were still half full. "I appreciate your honesty, Ryan. It's good to know where things stand." Margaret— "Come on, don't be dramatic," Ryan said, already reaching for his phone again. "We're trying to help you here. These places have everything you need. You won't have to cook or clean. They have social programs. You might even make some friends your own age." Friends her own age, as if she were a child being sent to summer camp. "I have friends," Margaret said quietly, thinking of Mrs. Rodriguez downstairs who traded gossip for homemade empanadas, of Mr. Chen at the corner market who saved the best produce for her, of her Tai Chi group who'd become like a second family over the years. "In this neighborhood," Ryan scoffed, Margaret, be realistic. You're a 62-year-old woman living alone in a declining area. Your Mandarin is rusty, your computer skills are basically non-existent. And let's face it, what kind of job could you even get at your age? You need us. Each word was a small cut, precise and deep. Margaret had always known Ryan looked down on her, but she told herself it was just his way, that underneath the corporate polish was a good heart that loved her daughter. Now she wasn't so sure. I should check on the pie, she said, escaping to the kitchen. Through the thin wall, she could hear them arguing in hushed tones, Sarah's voice pleading, Ryan's dismissive. The pumpkin pie sat perfect and golden on the cooling rack, made from scratch like everything else, with the special touch of cardamom her mother had taught her. She stared at it, this symbol of traditions Ryan would probably call inefficient, and felt something shift inside her. When she returned to the dining room, Sarah's eyes were red-rimmed. Mom, I'm so sorry, he didn't mean— Yes, I did, Ryan interrupted. Someone needs to be the adult here and say what needs to be said. Margaret, you're living in the past. The world has moved on. You can either adapt or get left behind. And right now, you're just holding everyone back. Margaret looked at her son-in-law, really looked at him, saw the expensive watch, the tailored shirt, the confidence of someone who'd never had to wonder if the lights would stay on this month, and she made a decision. You're right, she said quietly. Both Ryan and Sarah looked shocked. You're absolutely right, Ryan. I am living in the past, and it's time for that to change. Well, good, Ryan said, clearly thrown by her acquiescence. We can start looking at places this weekend. No, Margaret interrupted. That's not what I meant. You're right that I need to adapt, that I need to think about my future, but I'll do it my way. She walked to the hall closet and pulled out a manila folder she'd been keeping for years. Inside were business plans, sketches, ideas she'd dreamed about during long nights when sleep wouldn't come. A lifetime of deferred dreams reduced to paper and hope. What's this? Sarah asked as Margaret spread the papers on the table. My future, Margaret said. I've always wanted to start a business. A meal prep service for busy families, using real ingredients, traditional recipes made with love, the kind of food that brings people together instead of pushing them apart. Ryan actually laughed. A meal prep service? Margaret, do you have any idea how competitive that market is? The overhead, the regulations, the marketing costs? You'd need investors, a business plan, commercial kitchen space. Then I'll learn, Margaret said simply. I'll take classes. I'll figure it out. With what money? Ryan challenged. Margaret looked him straight in the eye. With the money I won't be spending on a senior living community. The room fell silent. Outside, a siren wailed in the distance, the city's reminder that life kept moving whether you were ready or not. This is insane, Ryan finally said. Sarah, talk some sense into her. But Sarah was looking at the papers, seeing sketches of logos, menus written in her mother's careful handwriting, notes about nutrition and family traditions and the importance of gathering around a table. Mom, she said softly, you've been thinking about this for a while. Since your father died, Margaret admitted. He always said I was the best cook he knew. Said I could make millions if I wanted. I told him we didn't need millions, just each other. But now, she looked at Ryan, now maybe I need to prove that I'm not just a burden, that I have something to offer this world you say has moved on without me. Ryan stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. Sarah, we're leaving. When your mother comes to her senses and realizes she needs help, she knows where to find us. Sit down, Sarah said quietly. What? I said sit down, Ryan. There was steel in Sarah's voice that Margaret had never heard before. My mother cooked this entire meal from scratch. The least you can do is finish it. Ryan sat, but the rest of the dinner passed in uncomfortable silence. The food grew cold, the conversation stilted. Margaret noticed Ryan checking his phone every few minutes, probably calculating how much this inefficient dinner was costing him in time. As they prepared to leave, Sarah hugged her mother tightly at the door. Mom, I'm so sorry. I had no idea he was going to say those things. But you were thinking them, Margaret said gently. It's okay, sweetheart. Maybe I needed to hear it. You're not a burden, Sarah whispered fiercely. You've never been a burden. Margaret patted her daughter's cheek. I know, but Ryan's not entirely wrong. I have been living in the past. It's time to change that. This business idea. Mom, it's going to be hard. I know. Really hard. Most new businesses fail in the first year. I know that too. Sarah pulled back, studying her mother's face. But you're going to do it anyway. What else am I going to do? Sit in a senior community playing bingo while the world moves on without me? Margaret smiled. Your father used to say I was too stubborn for my own good. Maybe it's time to put that stubbornness to use. After they left, Margaret stood in her quiet apartment, surrounded by the remnants of a Thanksgiving that had gone nothing like she'd planned. But instead of sadness, she felt something else, a spark of determination she hadn't felt in years. She walked to her computer, the ancient desktop Ryan had mocked, and opened a web browser. Typed slowly, carefully, how to start a food business in New York. Thousands of results appeared. Overwhelming, terrifying, but also exciting. She thought about Ryan's words. What kind of job could you even get at your age? Not a job, she thought. A business. My business. Outside her window, Queens sprawled endlessly, a patchwork of cultures and cuisines, of dreams deferred and dreams realized. Somewhere out there were people who needed what she had to offer. Not just food, but connection, tradition, the warmth of a meal made with care. Margaret Chen Burden was about to become Margaret Chen, entrepreneur. She just had to figure out how. The radiator clanked its familiar rhythm, like applause from an old friend. Margaret smiled and clicked on the first link. She had a lot to learn, but she had something more valuable than Ryan's MBA or his efficiency metrics or his 5-year plans. She had everything to prove and nothing left to lose. The November wind rattled the windows, but inside, Margaret felt warm. Tomorrow she would wake early, do her Tai Chi in the park, and then begin the hardest journey of her life. But tonight she would plan. She would dream. She would take the first step from burden to boss. And somewhere in his Manhattan apartment, Ryan Wallace had no idea that he'd just created his future competition, an eventual employer. But that part of the story was still to come. The small business development center in Flushing looked nothing like Margaret had imagined. She'd expected something intimidating, all glass and steel like Ryan's office building. Instead, she found herself in a converted community center, the walls lined with inspirational posters in English, Spanish, Mandarin, and Korean. The November cold had given way to an unseasonably warm December, and she'd walked the 30 minutes from her apartment, saving the bus fare. Mrs. Chen, a young woman appeared, tablet in hand, wearing jeans and a blazer that somehow made business casual look approachable. I'm Jennifer Liu. I'll be your advisor today. Margaret had rehearsed this moment for 2 weeks, ever since that disastrous Thanksgiving dinner. She'd filled out forms online, watching YouTube tutorials to navigate websites that seemed designed for people half her age. Now, sitting across from Jennifer in a small conference room that smelled of coffee and possibility, she felt like a student again. So, you want to start a meal prep business? Jennifer said, scanning her tablet. Tell me about your experience. I've been cooking for 40 years, Margaret began, then stopped. That sounded so ordinary. I mean, I don't have restaurant experience, but that's okay, Jennifer interrupted gently. Many successful food entrepreneurs start from home cooking. What makes your food special? Margaret thought of Ryan's dismissive words, pushed them aside. I cook the way people used to cook. Real ingredients, no shortcuts. Traditional recipes but adapted for busy families. The kind of food that makes you slow down, even for just a moment. Jennifer's stylus moved across her tablet. That's a strong value proposition. Nostalgia meets convenience. Have you done any market research? Market research. Margaret had looked up the term, but it still felt foreign on her tongue. I've been talking to people in my building. My neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, she works 2 jobs. Never has time to cook for her kids. Mr. Patel on the 3rd floor. His wife is in the hospital and he's been living on takeout. There are so many people like them. Informal market research is still market research, Jennifer said with an encouraging smile. Now let's talk about the challenges. New York has strict regulations for food businesses. You'll need licenses, a commercial kitchen space, insurance. I've been reading about shared commercial kitchens, Margaret said quickly, pulling out a folder of printed pages. She'd discovered the print function at the library, each page representing hours of research. There's one in Long Island City. They rent by the hour. Jennifer looked impressed. You've done your homework. What about startup capital? This was the hard part. I have $23,000 saved. My husband's life insurance. What's left of it? She didn't mention how she'd guarded that money for 15 years, refusing to touch it even when things got tight. It had been her safety net, and now she was about to cut it loose. That's actually not bad for a lean startup, Jennifer said, but you'll need to be very careful with cash flow. Have you thought about your business structure? They spent the next 2 hours going through details that made Margaret's head spin. LLC versus sole proprietorship, sales tax permits, food handlers' licenses. By the end, her notebook was full of terms she'd have to Google later, but she also had something more valuable, a checklist. This is overwhelming, Margaret admitted as they wrapped up. It always is at first, Jennifer said. But you know what? I've seen 25-year-olds with MBAs who came in less prepared than you. You'll need help, though. Do you have anyone who can assist with the technical side? Website, social media, online ordering systems? Margaret thought of Sarah, who'd been calling daily since Thanksgiving, their conversations careful dances around the elephant in the room. Maybe, she said. Outside the center, Margaret stood on the busy Flushing Street, watching the flow of people, office workers grabbing quick lunches, parents juggling children in shopping bags, elderly couples moving slowly through the crosswalk. Her future customers, if she could reach them. Her phone buzzed. Sarah. Hi, sweetheart, Margaret answered. Mom, where are you? I stopped by your apartment. I'm in Flushing. I had a meeting. A pause. What kind of meeting? With a business advisor? About my meal prep service? The silence stretched longer this time. Margaret could picture Sarah in her apartment hallway, probably wearing one of her work suits, torn between supporting her mother and keeping peace with her husband. Mom, can we talk? In person? They met at their usual spot, a tiny coffee shop on Northern Boulevard that had somehow survived the neighborhood's constant transformation. Sarah was indeed in her work clothes, her marketing manager uniform of sleek black and worried expression. You're really doing this, Sarah said, not a question. I am. Mom, Ryan's been difficult since Thanksgiving. He thinks I'm enabling you. Margaret stirred her tea, choosing her words carefully. And what do you think? I think, Sarah's voice caught. I think I've been a terrible daughter. I let him say those things to you. I let him make you feel like you were less than you are. Oh, sweetheart. No, let me finish. Sarah pulled out her phone, swiped to show a spreadsheet. I've been running numbers. If you're serious about this, you'll need a website, social media presence, a booking system. I can help with that. Margaret stared at her daughter. But Ryan can deal with it, or not. His choice. Sarah's jaw set in a way that reminded Margaret of James. You're my mother. You held our family together with nothing but determination and love. If you want to start a business at 62, then I'm going to help you succeed. Margaret felt tears prick her eyes. I can't pay you. I'm not asking for pay. I'm asking for 10% equity when you make it big. Sarah managed a watery smile. Besides, someone needs to drag you into the 21st century. You're still using a Gmail address with numbers in it. They laughed, tension breaking like morning ice. There's something else, Sarah said, growing serious again. Emma and Josh have been asking about you. Ryan told them you're too busy to see them. Margaret's hand tightened on her cup, using the grandchildren as leverage. That was low, even for Ryan. They can help me test recipes, Margaret said firmly. Official taste testers for Grandma's kitchen. He won't like that. Then he can cook for them himself. Sarah grinned, the first real smile Margaret had seen from her in months. Have you picked a name for the business? Margaret had been thinking about this constantly. Chen's Kitchen? Too simple? Or maybe Memories and Meals? What about From Grandmother's Table? Sarah suggested. It tells a story. People don't just want food. They want the feeling of being cared for. From Grandmother's Table. Margaret rolled it around in her mind, tasting the words like a new recipe. I like it. Over the next month, Margaret's life transformed into a whirlwind of preparation. Her apartment became command central, the dining table disappearing under layers of paperwork, recipe cards, and Sarah's laptop, borrowed semi-permanently. She woke at 5 each morning, not for Tai Chi but for online courses, food safety certification, basic business accounting, social media for small business. The computer that Ryan had mocked became her lifeline. She learned to navigate websites that had once seemed like foreign countries. YouTube became her university, teaching her everything from Excel basics to food photography. Her browser history read like a middle-aged fever dream. What is SEO? How to calculate food cost percentage? Commercial kitchen rental NYC? Is it too late to start a business at 62? Mrs. Rodriguez became her first unofficial focus group, sampling container after container of test recipes. This reminds me of my mother's arroz con pollo, she said one evening, savoring a spoonful of Margaret's fusion version. But something's different. Better. 5-spice powder, Margaret confided. Just a pinch. Brings out the savory notes. You need to sell this. I'd buy 10 containers right now. The commercial kitchen in Long Island City was a revelation. The first time Margaret walked in, she felt like an imposter among the young chefs and food truck owners who moved with practiced efficiency. But the kitchen manager, a gruff ex-Navy cook named Bill, took her under his wing. First rule, he said, showing her around the gleaming industrial equipment. Respect the space. Second rule, respect the other cooks. Third rule, don't be afraid to ask questions. Everyone here started somewhere. Her first official cooking session was a disaster. She'd miscalculated the scaling of her recipes, burned a batch of her signature honey ginger chicken, and discovered that cooking for 50 was vastly different from cooking for 5. She went home that night aching in muscles she'd forgotten existed, questioning everything. But she went back the next day, and the next. Sarah built the website during stolen lunch hours, creating something clean and warm that told Margaret's story without being saccharine. They staged photo shoots in Margaret's apartment, Sarah art directing while Margaret cooked, turning her tiny kitchen into a studio. "We need to show the process," Sarah insisted, adjusting Margaret's hands as she shaped dumplings. "People want authenticity." The Instagram account started slowly. Margaret's first post, a picture of her hands kneading dough, her wedding ring catching the light, got 12 likes, all from Sarah's friends. But she kept posting, learning the rhythm of hashtags and engagement, concepts that would have seemed like science fiction a year ago. Then came the permits, the insurance, the business bank account where her life savings looked suddenly small. Each step forward felt like climbing a mountain in flip-flops, but Margaret kept climbing. 3 months after Thanksgiving, she was ready for her soft launch. 20 meals, delivered to friends and neighbors who'd agreed to be guinea pigs. Margaret spent 18 hours in the commercial kitchen, Sarah by her side, portioning containers with military precision. "This marinade needs more time," Margaret fretted, checking the teriyaki salmon for the 3rd time. "Mom, it's perfect. Everything's perfect. You've tested these recipes 100 times. But what if—" "No what ifs." Sarah sealed another container with practiced efficiency. "You've got this." The orders went out on a frigid February morning. Margaret couldn't eat, couldn't focus on anything but her phone, waiting for feedback. The first text came from Mrs. Rodriguez. "My kids actually sat down together for dinner. No phones. They said it tasted like love." By evening, her phone was buzzing constantly. Photos of empty containers, requests for next week's menu, questions about portion sizes and dietary restrictions. Real customer feedback for a real business. That night, Margaret sat in her apartment, her office, she reminded herself, looking at the spreadsheet Sarah had taught her to maintain. 20 meals sold. After costs, she'd made exactly $74 in profit. $74. Ryan probably spent more than that on a single lunch, but it was her $74. Earned with her hands, her recipes, her courage. Her phone rang. "Sarah, check your Instagram," her daughter said breathlessly. Margaret navigated to the app with increasing confidence. Her follower count had jumped from 47 to 124. The dumpling-making video had been shared by a food blogger with 10,000 followers. Comments were pouring in. "Where can I order? Do you deliver to Brooklyn? My grandmother used to cook like this. We need to scale up," Sarah said. "I'm coming over. We have planning to do." As Margaret waited for her daughter, she walked to her window. Queens spread out before her, lights twinkling like possibilities. Somewhere out there, families were sitting down to her food, sharing conversations over her recipes. She wasn't just feeding people. She was creating moments. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. She almost ignored it, then saw the preview. "Mrs. Chen, my name is David Kim, and I run a boutique food distribution company." Margaret's heart raced as she opened the full message. A distributor. Someone who could help her reach beyond her neighborhood, beyond what she could deliver personally. The burden was becoming a business owner, and this was just the beginning. She thought of Ryan, probably at home in his expensive apartment, efficient and cold, wondered if he knew what Sarah was doing, if he cared that his words had lit a fire he couldn't extinguish. It didn't matter. Margaret had work to do. From Grandmother's Table was open for business. The meeting with David Kim took place in a sleek coffee shop in Midtown, the kind where a simple latte cost $12 and everyone spoke in hushed tones about Series A funding. Margaret felt out of place in her practical clothes among the startup uniforms of expensive casual wear, but she held her samples cooler with confidence earned through 6 months of hard work. "Mrs. Chen," David stood as she approached, his handshake firm and genuine. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe 40, with kind eyes behind designer glasses. "I've been following your Instagram. My mother forwarded me your dumpling video. She said it reminded her of her grandmother's cooking. Thank you for meeting with me," Margaret said, settling into the uncomfortable modern chair. "I have to admit, this is all very new to me." "Your honesty is refreshing," David smiled. "Most food entrepreneurs I meet pretend they know everything. Let me tell you what caught my attention about From Grandmother's Table." He pulled out his phone, showing her analytics she didn't know existed. "Your engagement rates are exceptional. People aren't just buying your food, they're sharing stories about it. That's gold in this market." "I just cook what I know," Margaret said simply. "Exactly. Authenticity can't be manufactured." David leaned forward. "I run a distribution network for small batch food producers. We handle logistics, expand your reach to high-end grocery stores, corporate clients. The question is, can you scale?" Scale. That word had been haunting Margaret for weeks as orders grew beyond what she could handle alone. She'd hired Mrs. Rodriguez's daughter, Elena, to help with prep work and a delivery driver for the expanding radius, but demand was outpacing supply. How much scale are we talking about? Margaret asked. To start, 500 meals a week. Within a year, if things go well, 2,000? Margaret's mind raced. 2,000 meals meant more kitchen time, more staff, more everything. I'd need investment capital. That's where I might be able to help. I know investors who specifically look for businesses like yours, founder-led, community-focused, with proven market traction. He paused. But I should warn you, taking investment means giving up some control. Are you prepared for that? Control. She thought of Ryan's words about being a burden, about holding everyone back. Here was someone offering to help her fly, but at what cost? I need to think about it, Margaret said honestly. Of course. Try some of our current partners' products. Get a feel for our standards. David handed her an elegant box of samples. And Mrs. Chen? Whatever you decide, what you've built is impressive. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. The train ride back to Queens gave Margaret time to think. 6 months ago, she'd been a burden. Now she was considering investment offers. The transformation felt surreal, like wearing clothes that didn't quite fit yet. Her phone buzzed. Sarah. How did it go? Before she could respond, another text appeared. This one from a number she recognized with a mixture of dread and anger. Ryan. We need to talk. Tonight. Our place. Margaret stared at the message. They'd had no direct contact since Thanksgiving. All communication filtered through Sarah. Why now? She arrived at Sarah and Ryan's Brooklyn brownstone as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. The house represented everything Ryan valued. Prestigious address, calculated investment, visible success. Margaret had always felt small here. Sarah answered the door, tension written across her face. Mom, I didn't know he was going to text you. It's fine, sweetheart, Margaret said, though her stomach churned. Ryan was in the living room, still in his work clothes but with his tie loosened, bourbon in hand. He looked tired, older somehow. The confident sheen dulled. Margaret? He said, not standing. Drink? No, thank you. Sarah hovered between them like a referee. Ryan, whatever this is about, sit down, Sarah. Both of you. Margaret remained standing. What do you want, Ryan? He took a long sip of bourbon. My company's laying off 20% of staff. Market correction, they're calling it. I survived this round, but barely. I'm sorry to hear that, Margaret said, meaning it despite everything. Are you? Ryan's laugh was bitter. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're doing pretty well. That food blogger, the one who shared your video, she's married to a VP at my company. Suddenly everyone's talking about my mother-in-law's inspiring journey. Ryan? Sarah warned. No, let me finish. He stood, pacing to the window. 6 months ago, I said you were a burden. I was an ass. I know that. But I was also scared. Margaret hadn't expected that. Scared of what? Of ending up like my parents. They worked their whole lives, saved every penny, and then my dad's pension got cut in half. Company restructuring. Now they're 75 and delivering groceries for app companies to make ends meet. He turned back to them. I've been terrified of not having enough, of being dependent, of being a burden myself. The room fell silent. Outside, Brooklyn traffic hummed its evening song. That doesn't excuse what you said, Margaret said quietly. No, it doesn't. But watching you these past months, Sarah shows me your posts, your reviews. You took my worst words and turned them into fuel. That takes guts I'm not sure I have. What do you want, Ryan? Margaret asked again. My company does catered lunches, big contracts. The current vendor is, he winced, awful. Processed garbage that sits in the kitchen all day because no one wants to eat it. I may have mentioned to our office manager that I know someone who does authentic, high-quality meal prep. Sarah gasped. Ryan, are you... I'm saying if you can handle a 50-person lunch order twice a week, the contract is yours. Standard corporate rates, which means... He pulled out his phone, showed her a number that made Margaret's knees weak. This would change everything, Margaret breathed. There's a catch, Ryan continued. You'd need to prove you can handle it. A trial run next Friday. The entire leadership team will be there, including the CEO. If you nail it, you're in. If not, I understand, Margaret said. Mom, that's only 8 days away, Sarah protested. For 50 people? That's huge. I can do it, Margaret said, her mind already racing through menus, logistics, prep schedules. Ryan set down his empty glass. There's one more thing. If you get this contract, if you keep growing, I might need a job myself in a few months. The next round of layoffs won't be so kind. The irony was thick enough to cut. Margaret studied her son-in-law, saw the fear beneath the bravado. the cracks in his armor of efficiency and control. "Let's see how the trial run goes," she said carefully. After leaving Sarah and Ryan's, Margaret didn't go home. Instead, she took the subway to the commercial kitchen in Long Island City. She needed to think, and she thought best with her hands in motion. Bill was there, prepping for his food truck's morning run. "Burning the midnight oil, Chen? Big opportunity," she said, tying on her apron. "Scary big. The good ones always are." He watched her pull out ingredients. "What are you making?" "I don't know yet. Something that says professional but approachable. Sophisticated but comforting. Something that feeds 50 executives but makes them remember why they love food." Bill whistled.